Good morning, viewers. Hello and welcome to the Morning News Show, where we bring you the latest headlines and insightful stories to kickstart your day. I'm Koina Sharma and you are watching CNN News 18. First up, on top of this bulletin, we're tracking some updates on the Syrian civil war. In a stunning turn, the regime of Syrian President Bashar Al Assad has fallen apart after rebels advanced into the capital Damascus, catching government forces by surprise 10 days after a lightning advance by insurgents first began. Now, Bashar al-Assad, the ousted Syrian president, has now fled to Moscow and received asylum from Russia amid a rebel offensive that ended his family's rule. While United States of America's President-elect Donald Trump distances U.S. from Syria's conflict, outgoing President Joe Biden has said that the sudden collapse of the Syrian government under Bashar Assad is a fundamental act of justice after decades of repression. But it was a moment of risk and uncertainty for the Middle East. Now, meanwhile, pointing to the crisis-ridden Middle East with the swiftly developing situation in Syria, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar has said that there were challenges from Gaza to Lebanon to Syria and that India has to be realistic about competing interests in the region.
After 13 years of civil war in Syria, more than half a century of brutal authoritarian rule by Bashar Assad and his father before him, rebel forces have forced Assad to resign his office and flee the country. We're not sure where he is, but there's word that he's in Moscow. At long last, the Assad regime has fallen. As we all turn to the question of what comes next, the United States will work with our partners and the stakeholders in Syria to help them seize an opportunity to manage the risks. These past few days have been historic. And it's in the days ahead that will determine the future of this country. And we intend to approach them with strength, wisdom, and resolve. So thank you very much. God bless America, and God protect our troops. Thank you.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. We'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border of Israel.
How can we cooperate strategically? I think first of all, obviously you cooperate in a political, diplomatic way. What we do in my business is essentially try to address the challenges of the day as collectively and as effectively as possible. And this today would extend from Gaza to Lebanon, now to Syria as well. But at the same time, we have to be realistic about competing interests in this region. So diplomacy is often easier said than done. One of the interesting evolution of the world today is actually on different issues, sometimes even in the same region. You have a different combination of countries that are working together. And that, to me, is actually the characteristic of our era.
Well, the sudden fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime has now upended the Middle East as rebel forces seize control of Damascus. This marks a major shift in the region's power dynamics, and joining us on the broadcast for a better perspective into the entire situation is Akanksha Swaroop. A very good morning, Akanksha. Akanksha, given Russia's close ties to the Assad regime, what are the implications of his seeking asylum in Moscow to begin with?
Like Kuhina rightly mentioned, after numerous reports, all kinds of reports indicating that perhaps Bashar al-Assad's plane has also crashed. We are finally now learning from our sources at CNN that Bashar al-Assad has been given asylum in Moscow on humanitarian grounds. And the fact that Moscow has been the country where he is now seeking refuge only goes on to indicate the kind of ties shared with Moscow, not to with Tehran as well. So implications now, there are all kind of reports doing the rounds that could there be a U.S. hand behind this entire force of Damascus, that we know that the rebels, HTS, have taken over Syria. There are also reports indicating the Kremlin and its own naval bases which were there in Syria have in fact retreated. They are now on the way back to Russia. What was the deal went behind for Russia to retreat? That is the big question. There are also analysts who are indicating that it could be that was allowed to keep Donbass as a region in its own control, which is why they've chosen to retreat from Syria. That will also open gateways now for the United States and for the larger Western interests, including the NATO allies. We know that HTS is a Sunni group that has also been propped up by Turkey, and we all know that Ankara has been a Sunni force. So, this is also apart from a fight for geopolitical autonomy. Kuhina, this is also a fight on terms of ethnic, religious divide. Having said that, we'll have to see how Moscow goes forward for its own interests, because oil has been an interest for everyone over there, particularly for Russia. India's also been importing oil from Syria. We'll have to see how Russia is willing to move forward with the UN-monitored negotiations, plus the Kremlin now to engage in UN-monitored sort of a dialogue which is expected to take place any time from today. There are already discussions happening in Geneva. At the same time, we know that the Doha summit is also to happen. So these changing of geopolitical situations, as Dr. S. Jaishankar was highlighting, one that is now already added to Gaza, Lebanon, and the Syria situation, we'll have to see how the geopolitical climate is going to change actually in the Middle East.
Right, Akanksha, in terms of Washington's stance in this entire scenario, President Joe Biden has called the collapse of the Assad regime a fundamental act of justice. How is the Biden administration basically trying to navigate the delicate balance between celebrating the fall of a dictator and addressing the potential instability that could follow, especially at a time when Donald Trump has already distanced himself from this Syrian civil war?
Kuhina, one cannot deny the fact that the United States also has had its own troops over there.
Right.
So when Joe Biden said that we will be engaging with groups to establish the transition away from Assad's regime for the more sovereign Syria, is an indication of how much U.S. is willing to move ahead with this. Mm-hmm. He's also talking about how he will be helping ensure stability in eastern Syria, because ISIS remains the primary concern for the United States. They do not want an HTS, which, as we all know, is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, to go back and merge with the ISIS. Of course, HTS has also made those assurances, but we've already seen the situation as far as Taliban is concerned in Afghanistan. Will they be able to sort of stand their own ground, HTS, unlike the Taliban? Remember, when the Taliban shot the they had made similar promises that approach towards will be different. We will govern it in a new style. Those kind of had been dropped. None of that sort of played out on ground zero. So similar concerns are now rising for HTS as well. And as slightly highlighted, yes, there's a clear contrast in what the outgoing US president is saying and the incoming President Donald Trump is saying that we have no interest in Syria. This is not our fight to fight. So we'll have to see how far the United States is in fact willing to play with those assurances that the US, along with the other NATO allies, is willing to pitch in. Whether will they be able to sort of support Syrian neighbors like Jordan, Lebanon, Iraq, and primarily Israel, because remember the fight is going on and has its own vested interest as far as the Lebanese border is concerned.
Right, Akanksha, thank you so much for bringing in all those updates and insightful details on the Syrian civil war. But I'll request you to stay with us on the broadcast as we're getting more breaking information.